So we're now live.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Hi, Adam.
How are you doing, Gary? Okay?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Welcome to everybody, especially if you're joining us live. The recording will be available, so you might be watching it at your own leisure at some other point in the future. I hope the weather's as nice, whatever point that is, as it is this morning. It's a beautiful day. Adam, can you start the slideshow for us?
Yeah, of course. So what I'll do now, let me share my screen and get up the presentation now. So if I share screen.
And I think for the first time we are streaming live on Facebook as well.
Yes.
So first for me. Don't know about you.
Yeah, we are. We've got on Facebook. Hopefully we've got a few viewers there. Join us on the Service Junior page.
Excellent.
I've got to say, it is the first time for me to be live on Facebook.
So today we're going to focus on ways to improve communication with your customers. So we'll have a brief chat about what that means. So there's a couple of slides that will only take 5 minutes or so, and then we'll jump into the software, and Adam's going to run us through a demonstration of parts of the system where we think you can achieve that. So moving on to the first slide.
So sorry, there you go.
It seems like an obvious statement to make, Adam. I guess we now live in an on-demand economy, but I guess this is the way of the world these days. And I think for me, the conversations that we have, it feels to me as though people are hugely influenced by what goes on in their personal lives. Again, it's a pretty obvious statement to make, but is that true? Is that what you find?
Yeah, I do, and I think it's impossible not to be, really, to be honest. If you think in our personal lives on a day-to-day basis, everyone, pretty much most people now have a smartphone. They have data on their phone instantly. They can log onto their phone and find out any sort of information out almost immediately, whether that's on a phone or a tablet. And they're bringing that technology to work, as everyone does. So they might be sat at a desk and they still have that technology. However, what might be vastly different is the technology they use at work. So because of that, it's possible not to make comparisons to say, well, we've got this data, we've got this technology on the outside life, but in the work life, we're using outdated technology, and that obviously leads to not having that on-demand economy.
Yeah, it's interesting that I've only literally just thought of this as you said it. I guess working from home has had a big influence on that as well. So that's probably accelerated in the last 12 or 18 months because a lot of us are working from home, and therefore we have our personal technology around us. So it's easy to make the comparison to the technology that you use at work to the other stuff, your laptops, your phones, your tablets, all the rest of it. Yeah, that's
absolutely.
interesting.
And in some cases, they might be using their own technology at home to do the work, to carry out their work lives, but their work haven't caught up to date with that technology.
Yeah, I think they phrase it, bring your own device, BYOD, and I think we've definitely seen a massive uplift in that recently.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so I'll move on now to our next slide.
So we're living in a different era. Yeah, we certainly are. I don't think anyone's going to doubt that based on the last 12 or 18 months. But I think more specifically, this slide was generated to demonstrate how the journey has progressed over the decades, and we started it at the 70s because that's when technology really started to have an influence on people's working lives. And not to labour the point, but we're in a situation now where actually people's decisions and the relationships between customers and suppliers has progressed from a product-led relationship to what we term a relationship-centric ideal, which is really what today's webinar is about, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just about how we're going to meet the new expectations, really. And we believe there's various ways of doing that. And after having conversations with our clients, I thought it'd be worthwhile having this discussion today and bringing it up, really.
Good.
So, yeah, here's our next slide.
Customers now expect the on-demand experience. Yeah, absolutely. And it's the difficulty that I think people have, or what they tell us, is that it's hard to nail what that expectation is, because actually the way that we've developed over the last 15 or 20 years is that everybody's expectation is different. So you can see here on one of them there is personalized information. So what we're actually talking about is there isn't a one size fits all. So you could have 10 customers, and each of those 10 customers will want something different in the way that you communicate. So some of them will want a more old school experience, as we would term it, which still has a great deal of value, the customer visits, the account management and reviews. But actually, definitely what people are telling us is that what their customers demand now is choice. So it's about delivering the information that they want in the format that they want at the time that they want it. Is that true of what you hear?
Yeah, absolutely. After all the conversations I have with clients and prospects, that is quite common, really, and it's also through the old technology, really. That how they communicate with their customers is more often not limited and dictated by the technology they use. So that they perhaps can't communicate, or they can't meet the customer's expectations in the way that they wish. And that's really down to the fact that I guess every individual in every company potentially wants unique, different information for their job role, but they want it delivered at a time that is convenient to them, as you mentioned, in a format that they need to.
Yeah.
So it's being able to meet that expectation, not just for one customer, but for the users, the users in the customers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Essentially.
Okay, let's move on. Yeah, it's always nice to throw a stat in somewhere to kind of illustrate the point. But I remember when we generated this, and even that is startling to me, that nearly half of customers are more loyal to people that use the latest technology to engage with them. And that's simply based on the discussion that we've just had. It's their expectation. They have an expectation, and if you deliver and meet that expectation, then that logically increases loyalty.
Yeah, and look, in a day, as we mentioned, the technology is on the rise, and how customers communicate. So if these guys aren't doing it, there's a good chance someone else might well be.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I'll move on now to the next slide, which is
looks like
quite a bit.
Yeah, it looks like you've been in my wardrobe.
Yes.
So on-demand information, yeah, it's a great phrase that we hear a lot, and I can see that you've got old way, new way. And I was looking at these slides before I joined, and one of the things that struck me is we've actually described it as old way, but for a lot of people, what they tell us is the old way is actually the current way. Yeah. What struck me about some of the things that you've listed in there particularly was bespoke reports, because it's often a controversial word, bespoke. What do you mean by bespoke reports in this context?
Well, what I mean is there's a lot of people or companies that have customers that demand certain reports that perhaps their software or technology doesn't deliver as a standard output. Therefore, what we mean by custom reports is that, well, custom written reports that can be delivered to customers, which can actually, if it's on old technology, can be time consuming and expensive, or perhaps they might have multiple members of staff compiling data, which then needs to be manipulated in Excel or some sort of document before it's actually delivered to the customer, which obviously sounds like a very manual process to me. I'm sure it does to lots of other people, which is time consuming. Yeah,
that is what people tell us all the time, and that is when we speak to people. That is, as I said earlier, that definitely the way you just described it. That's confirmed it. That is the current way for most people. It is, technology dictates how they communicate, and that doesn't meet with the concept of on demand. It's completely at odds with that concept. Yeah. And I can see that we've got on the right hand side, the new way, as we're phrasing it. And I guess we're going to look at things like, towards the end of that paragraph, customer portal, personalized documentation, customer specific reports. But again, that's all about hitting different data points and providing that choice, isn't it? That's what we're going to look at.
Yeah, and be able to provide all of that, but with the same level of effort, really, to each customer in the different formats.
Yeah, good. Okay.
Moving on.
Yeah, one last stat, I guess. It's an obvious one, but it's really important to make because it relates to everything that we have discussed and we're going to discuss. Everybody likes new customers, but we all know, including us, that obtaining new customers is pretty expensive, and actually retaining the ones that you have is absolutely paramount. And as you mentioned earlier, if the market has an expectation that you're not meeting, then one of your competitors will.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's always that risk, especially when you compare. When we go back to that timeline of old technology all the way to new technology, it tracks with that.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to show
Yeah.
a demo in a moment. It's probably worth us covering a few of these points now.
Yeah, well, from here, I guess these are the areas that we've identified. I mean, look, in truth, that there are 1,000 ways that you can improve customer communication. But again, it goes back to that choice element. They can be quite unique to individual customers, even customers of ours. So these are some of the ones that we've identified. The two on the ends, portal and mobile device, seem obvious because that's technology that actually quite a lot of people still implement. So it'd be interesting to see what we mean by that and how we can progress that side of it and how we can progress those particular applications to be more helpful than maybe people utilize them for at the moment. Personalized documents is a great one because that's something we hear all the time. Personalized documents can be in the form of a report or even just in the form of check sheets, job sheets, invoices, information like that. If you have a standard invoice template, for example, that you ship to everybody, I have no doubt that you regularly get requests for it to be sent or displayed in another form. And actually, people that we speak to are telling us they're either saying we can't, no, which is never a great thing to say to your customer, or as you said earlier, they're going to great efforts to then make changes to quite rigid technology, which can be time consuming and expensive.
Absolutely.
And that's the same with customer specific information. That particularly does relate to reports. I know we talk to people all the time who tell us that it's more common, even when acquiring a new customer, which we talked about, even things like tender documents. Actually, it's quite common now for a tender document to incorporate a reporting requirement, as in we need information from you, as we said earlier, that has this information in it in this format and is delivered to us in this way. And a lot of people don't have the ability to tick that box in that tender document and say yes.
Well, they might well do because the information is there for them to use, and they will be able to provide their customers that information. But it's how they do that and how long it takes them, and is my opinion.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, we've bored people for 12 minutes now, so I don't want to go any much longer than 30 minutes in total. No. So if we can whiz through some of these points just to give people a flavor of what we're talking about and the way that software can deal with these types of challenges.
Yeah, definitely. I pretty much follow the same process we've looked at here, to be honest. So what I'll do now is if I jump to our software, basically. So can you all see, or Cara, can you see my screen?
Yeah, looks good to me.
Perfect. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump straight into our PDA device or mobile device that our engineers would use, or our customers' engineers would use on site to carry out that service, repair, installation work, whatever service-led activity they're doing on the customer's site, because that's where it all starts from. That's where the information goes to, and it's where most information in any database from an engineer comes from, if they use an electronic device.
That's a really good point to make, actually, is we talk about all this information being delivered to the customer, and improving customer communication, but actually the quality and the integrity of the data has to be there. And most of the information you send to your customer originates from your engineer, doesn't it? So
yeah, absolutely.
The improvement in customer communication is not just about information you send to them. It's about giving the people that work for you, your engineers and your internal staff, it's about giving them the ability to capture that information and record it better than maybe they're doing currently.
And it's also to make sure it's all consistent. If it's all consistent, it's all consistent in the office, which then makes it a lot easier to communicate with customers with that information, those reports, because it should all be the same. So
we probably know there's going to be jobs in here that we process and say what we've done. So what other things on the periphery of that do we think is going to help with customer discussions and communication?
So let's imagine you're on site as an engineer. I'm going to go into this top job. I'm going to go into this top job here as an example, and this is the information any engineer would see while he's on site. The work he's been issued to carry out. But what's important here for this conversation is the information the engineers can access, and then the conversation he's going to have on site with those customers. So if I go to equipment as an example, the engineer can see what asset or piece of equipment or what activity he's doing on site, but more importantly, he can view job history. So that means he's able to have much more meaningful conversations with the client while he's on site. He can see exactly the previous history, what's gone on, as it just downloads it now.
Yeah, because that's what our customers tell us, isn't it? Is that when the engineer is on site, it's not just that specific job that often their customer wants to talk to them about. So quite often what they want to discuss is things that may have happened previously, or if an engineer was on site in the morning or an engineer had been on site the previous afternoon. It's about arming the engineer with the information to be able to answer those questions, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I'm just loading that up now. I think my internet on my tablet seems to be a bit slow here.
Yeah, there's a lot of internet issues around at the moment. I was reading the news yesterday
that
large parts of the internet had crashed, so it doesn't surprise me.
My tablet's got a SIM card in, so bear with me 1 second. I'll just go back into this job, because it's important to show this information, because, like I say, it's those meaningful conversations they're going to have on site. If you can arm them with that to say exactly what's happened, here we go. So if I choose as an example, we'll go to 394. I've looked back as an engineer. I can see all the previous jobs that have happened on site, different types of jobs, as you can see. If I go into this 394 job here.
Sorry, so just to clarify that, the information that that job list there that you're reviewing is being taken directly from the back office, as we would call it, isn't it? So it's not coming, it's not there readily available on the device because of the quantity of data that might be there. It's actually about making the information available that's been recorded previously. So if you are having a conversation with customers, as I said earlier, then that information is here.
Yeah, it's live information. So what we can see here straight away is that we've got, as an engineer on site, I can previously see which engineer completed the last job, but more importantly, when the customer asks, you can tell them, well, what parts were fitted, how long was he on site for? And then if they carried out a certificate, such as a check sheet or any legislation they've got to carry out or regulations they've got to carry out, I can see here, if I click on that now, it should download the PDF to show me what the engineer carried out while he was on site.
I'm going to say you're brave downloading a document if you've got.
I know, you never know with our team what they've actually put on, but this is actually related to material handling industry. It doesn't matter what industry it relates to; it's just an output of a check sheet. But the engineer can see that straight away on site.
Yeah, that's great.
So that's the information the engineer can see while he's having the conversations with the client while he's doing the work. But also when it goes back to talk about what information the engineer actually enters into his device so that he can then report on it back at the office, we have what we call CCC module, which is essentially a check sheet format. And you can allow, if I was to hit onto this one here, you can essentially create the check sheets to ensure your engineers capture the right information in the most consistent way so that you can then report on that to keep customers back in the office in certain reports, or even just as a PDF to send back to the customer automatically.
This just goes back to that point that we were making earlier, which I say it's not all just about customer communication. What we're just doing here before we move on to other parts of that is demonstrating that actually, in order to improve customer communication, you also need to take care of the integrity of the data. You need to make it simple for your own staff to be able to input that data.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you can see that here. We tried to make it as simple as possible for an engineer to capture the important information. And if I just jump to safety systems here as an example, we can see we've designed a check sheet with certain questions and answers, i.e. faults or is the equipment okay? But if I select fault as an example on one of them, it'll ask me what the fault is. So you constantly capture that information. The engineers forced to do that.
I think the point here is that all of this is built and configured by the customer themselves, isn't it? So
yeah, absolutely.
Going back to those limitations, as we described them earlier, of older technology, is this would all be a labor-intensive, expensive process to digitize, if that's the right expression, these. But what we're actually saying is technology now, like ours, is available to be able to actually allow you to do that yourself. So if you have lots of check sheets or new check sheets, or you want to make changes to them, actually you can not only design them and digitize them, but you can also dictate how the logic works. So if you do click fault, you can dictate what the engineer has to do as a consequence of that.
Yeah, it just means there isn't a gap in data there.
That's brilliant, mate. What just quickly before you go off this as well, just if we have a look at the images, because I had this conversation with somebody recently where they were saying how valuable this element of it was.
Yeah, so basically this is where, and like you see, I've already worked on this job, so there's already a photo on here. But what I'm essentially going to do is, when you're completing that job, if I was as an engineer to hit this camera icon here, all it essentially does, if I just take a photo of that pen on my desk, is the engineer has the ability to add that onto his device, and with that, he can perhaps annotate it. I'm taking it the wrong way around there, excuse me, but he can annotate the damage perhaps that's occurred on site, which then again you can report straight back to your customer, and that goes on there.
Well, that's the conversation I was having the other day. Actually, was somebody saying how valuable it was to be able to not only take the images, to annotate them, and actually then incorporate them into the job sheets that they issue to the customer. And again, talking about ways to improve communication, if you're trying to illustrate, I think our customers, it's quite common when they tell us that they get a lot of not rejections, but questions about work that they've carried out. Sometimes it's about, was he really here for that long? Did she really change that part? Actually, there are a lot of issues around warranty work, and did the customer damage the equipment? How do we prove that? Actually, this improves customer communication in that respect massively, and it has a knock-on effect to our customer, to those service-led businesses, because you can just take an image of that damage, highlight it, draw a little image on it, write a little note on it, incorporate that into the job sheet. Then the number of what they were telling me was the number of queries that they had related to things like that had plummeted as a consequence of this.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
That's why I wanted to show it, because I thought it's something small, but potentially has a significant impact.
Yeah, it does, definitely. It's just all about recording it and getting an actual a photo of what's actually occurred.
That's great. Let's move on, because I'm getting conscious of time.
Yeah, so what I'm going to talk about now is you referred to it a minute ago, job sheets. How the customer receives their job sheets is important now, because as we mentioned earlier, it's all about choice. Some customers might want an email, some might want it posted to them in some cases, or just an automatic email. So if I was to jump into a customer account, so what we can see here is I've very quickly gone into an account for Asda. So you can see here I'm in Asda Superstore's account. What I'm essentially doing here is dictating how they receive information. So it's not company-wide, it's not for every customer, which it can be. We do have a set field for all customers, but for those unique ones that want certain information, we can go in here. If I very quickly go to an example, if I do job sheets here, as a user, the users can decide what template of job sheet their customer sees. And what I mean by that is, if I jump to this tab, how they design that report. So if customers have asked for certain information on certain job sheets that perhaps other customers aren't that particularly bothered about, well, here's where you design that. And
so to clarify, what you're actually saying there is, for all of the different types of customer-facing documentation, you can set it for everyone, but if you have examples where specific customers have specific unique requirements, you can accommodate that, because all these templates can be generated and edited by yourself. You can do it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. That's essentially,
Brilliant.
you can do it yourself. And one of the bugbears of old technology was that usually the software provider would have to do that for their software users.
Yeah.
Whereas now we allow the ability for our customers or our users to do that themselves.
So just the idea of that designer, though, I guess you could, like if you're subcontracting and things like that, you can actually just do basic things like change the branding.
Yeah. That's a good example. If you subcontract, you might want someone else's logo on there.
Yeah, or you might want Service Genie with Asda in this instance, and branded in that way. Yeah.
And you can quite easily do that. And then with that, what I've just drawn up here is you then design the email template that goes out to the customer. Yeah. So every time they receive a job sheet from you guys, they'll receive this email, and the data fields in there will be automatically populated. So really, in the office, no one has to do any sort of manual activity to send that document out.
But I guess again that this is potentially unique to this document and to this customer. Again, it goes back to the point of the whole discussion, which is you're meeting expectations. The expectation is there that you can do this. So somebody rings you up. If you're lucky enough to have Asda as a customer, and they say, well, we want the invoice delivered in this format, to be able to easily deliver that, you're meeting their expectation. That's the important thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good, that's great.
So I'll just move on from this. What I'm going to do now is I've just jumped straight into our reporting suite, business intelligence. Now, straight away, it's brought up a KPI view, which we could probably do a whole webinar on it in itself in a different session. That's essentially reports for the internal users. But for the purposes today, I want to cover what we call self-service reports.
Sounds interesting.
Again, it's similar to what a document just looked at a minute ago. It's all about the Service Genie users having the ability to create whatever reports for the customer's needs. So when the customer asks to report a certain format, perhaps, maybe could be something to do with equipment or jobs, the service Genie users can quite quickly create and amend these reports and provide the information to the customers how they want it and when they want it.
Okay.
So if I was to very quickly create let me create a very basic report. Have you got any examples of a report I can create?
I don't know. A customer asks you they think their part spend's been high recently, so they want to know what they're spending on parts and why.
Right, okay, so we're going to be looking at jobs perhaps. So what I can now do is select any data field in the system. So it's loaded up a few modules here. If I hover over job, it'll give me I'm hoping you can see that tooltip of some data fields within that.
Okay.
So I'm going to select jobs, and then did you mention stock parts then?
Yeah.
Right, okay, so now we'll look at parts 2 down to job. So I'll now select stock parts relation. So I'm essentially choosing to look at job data regarding the job and data for the stock on that job.
So just to clarify for my benefit, so what we're saying there on the left-hand side is they're all what we call the data fields that are already in the system. So so what it's saying is, if you tick this box, I'll make it available. I'll make this information available for you to report on.
Yeah, I just selected the make, model, and type because I'm going to be interested in what types of makes and models of equipment use the right different stock parts.
Understood.
I'm going to have to select some in stock too, so perhaps I do cost price and sell price perhaps.
Well, yeah, if we want to see that's what, so I said if we looked at the parts spend that would make sense.
Yeah, okay, so I'll go with that, and then if I hit apply column selection, it essentially updates what we're looking at on the right-hand side of the screen with the right data fields we've selected.
Okay.
So it's just loading up the report writer now. So what's important here, just close the left-hand side off, you can choose visualization. So it all goes back to choice. How does your customer want to see that information? We can see here, you can have a very standard table report, just with data, essentially. Bar charts, column charts, line charts, scatter graphs, pie charts or circles as it's listed here, and KPIs really. There's lots of
I understand what you're saying now. We're going back to that, as you said, the choice element about it being delivered in the format that they want. So that's what we're addressing here. So what we're actually building is a unique report, which we don't already have available.
Yeah.
And we're saying that this is the format that we want to generate it in.
Yeah, that's it basically. And we mentioned stock on jobs, didn't we? As a sell price of stocks of the stock items in a job. So I'm going to look at call date first on the x-axis because we're going to want to look at a time period.
Yeah.
And on the y-axis, I'll find selling price.
Yeah.
The stock item, just quite easily drag it onto the y-axis. And what it will do now, it'll begin to build that report for us. So you can see, what we're looking at here is the customer spend on site for the stock items against each job.
Yeah.
And quite noticeably there's a big jump in May. So you could either provide this to your customers, say, look, here's your spend over the last year or so, and you can.
And it has the value in that block, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I hover over that, it'll give me there's a sell price there, 2,600 for May. So last month you spent quite a chunk there. Now, if I wanted to drill down that information, I just need to change the mode. So if I go to drill mode, I can now essentially go into this and say, right, well, what are those stock parts? So if I hover over this and do SKU as an example, I'll do SKU, which is our stock item number.
Yeah.
It's telling me in May, this is the stock items that are booked onto that customer's site.
Okay, so you looked in May. So you looked at May and thought that's high. I wonder what's going on there. Yeah. So you're looking at the parts in there now. Okay,
you can see exactly what was booked on. But if that information isn't that meaningful to the customer, because you might want to see, let's say equipment ID perhaps, so you can see, well, that's clearly a FAN01 as a stock number. Say, well, what was that booked onto? So if I hit into this, if I just remove SKU and if I choose as an example equipment ID perhaps, it shows me which assets that stock items were booked onto in May.
So we can see there's 3 assets that spike in parts is related to a specific part, and that part has been used on these 3 items.
Yeah, exactly.
These 3 assets. Yeah, makes sense.
And then what you can do is you can save this chart, save this graph to your gallery, or just save this so you can keep going back to a later date and then export it. So if your customers need to see it straight away, it's what I've built that during the webinar. It's taking me 5 minutes, if that, to build that report. The information's there, and you can get sent straight to the customer. Or it could be used internally too, but obviously this is for the focus of customers today.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic.
So that's mainly how you can build reports and build meaningful information for your customers, how they want it, when they want it. What's also important to cover, what I wanted to cover today, was the web portals we mentioned on the slides. So if I just pull up the web portal here, now just to be clear on what a web portal is, or what we use a web portal for, it's essentially our service to customers, how their customers access their information. So if you're Asda, if you were providing equipment to Asda, it's how Asda log in and view the information on those jobs and assets. Is that clear?
Yeah. So this is specific to that customer. So we're logging in, and I can see we've got a lot of tiles here.
Yeah, and again, this is customized, and I decided to put these, what we call KPIs, on this screen.
So would it be accurate to say, I think I'm right in saying that what's displayed here has been dictated by the service-led business, so the service business, so they're displaying this information to their customer. Could that be unique for everybody? So, or is it standard and everyone gets the same stuff?
No, it's not standard at all. It's the service users can customize exactly what their customers see.
Got you.
More importantly, what they see is live information. So it's all going back to data, having instant data here and now. When they're on the move, whenever they want it, they can log in and know exactly what's going on.
In the wider context of this discussion, a lot of people associate, because portals are around, a lot of people associate portals with, finding reprints and stuff like that. But what we're actually saying here is how these systems and how this technology has grown is we're displaying information that is unique to them, that they've told us they want to see. We've done it in a nice, easy format in the tiled view to give them an overview. What happens if we want to see the detail?
Well, the users, similar to the reports we looked at in the office system a moment ago, the customer users can just see this information and quite easily drill down into it. So I was clicked on 8 for services, and it's showing me we have 8 on time at the moment. But if I go back to that, I can view a summary of that if I wanted to, or I can view the overdue ones and export the information too. Or if we look at open repairs as an example, if I hit that, it will show me the actual data of the open repairs. So where they are, what engineer was booked onto them, what the call date was. So when did we call for those jobs? And they can see that information.
I noticed on that one, if you go back to the KPI viewer, that one was a different color.
Oh yes, of course. And this is all the reason the color is to basically draw the eye, draw the attention to the certain boxes, and it's based on the data in there. So the users can define levels of where the color changes, so parameters essentially. So let's say if it was a late service, which we haven't got any at the moment, but if it was late services, you'd want that red. You want to see it straight away. You missed your the service provider has missed a service. The customer wants to know about that straight away. So it's to draw the attention to them, basically.
It's an interesting topic, because I've had lots of conversations where, when showing this to people, there's definitely a nervousness around potential service senior users, because they think, well, do I want to have my customers see this information? But the reality is, whilst in some instances there might be cases where you may not, it goes back to that word that we've used quite often today, which is expectation. I mean, if you're not delivering this level of information to the end user, then somebody else is.
Yeah, and you're right. Some customers might not want to provide. Some service providers might not want to provide this level of information, but it's all customizable in that sense. So you can pick and choose what each customer sees, not just any customer.
Yeah. I've probably taken you off down a cul-de-sac, and so I've ruined your flow. But
I'll just very quickly go over this.
Well, I can also see on these tiles, before you jump off that I'm guessing that those dates at the bottom are the dates in which the data relates to, and you can change it.
Yeah. So if I was to change open jobs, I can hit in that column option, and I can choose any sort of filters.
Understood.
So I could filter by period. I could filter by engineer as an example. So you could say what engineers came to this site, did what work.
Yeah, great.
And that information. And it just pulls up similar figures. So if it's to move along now, if it's going to equipment as an example, the customers, if you want them to, can log in and they can see what assets they have what assets you have listed on their site.
Yeah.
So you've got lots of different ones here. You can see what sites they're on, and again, we have filters. So if they've got hundreds, you can do a filter, and that could filter by assets.
Yeah, it's quite common for people to have thousands. So.
Yeah, exactly. So you wouldn't want to see it all at once. And it shows us a contract and next service date. If we go over to contracts now, here's where they'll be able to see any of their live, perhaps service or hire, if they do hire as a contract. And what we can see here is we've got a few here, got 3 actually, and the assets that are on there. And now, and again, as an example, going back to how the customers receive that information, if they wanted to view the contract, they can quite easily hit this and then download that information.
All right, so that's a copy of the contract.
Yeah, so it's that information,
Brilliant.
how they want it, when they want it.
Yeah, good.
So you can see that straight away. Further to that, if we go to accounts, what we might have here is lots of different invoices. Now, it's a bit of a poor example because we've got no service contract invoices for this period. But if I was to go to job invoices, what we can see here is actually we've got quite a few. So similar to how I downloaded a contract a minute ago, the customers can download their invoices from here too.
Great.
And that information is there. And obviously, if they've got hundreds of invoices, you can apply filters again.
In many ways, you know, you would argue that for a lot of people, they have an expectation that they could see this information. But I think, you know, the beginning of this part of it, you know, seeing those reports delivered in those summary tiles that you could drill into, and it being real time, I think that was really powerful. Thanks for
that. Well, then to finish on, we have jobs too, jobs and quotes. So the engineers can then actually see, well, it's not engineers, the customers, sorry, our customers can see, well, what current jobs are going on at the moment. We can see we've got two jobs open for these call dates, and these are the agreed visit dates and times, but obviously not been completed yet. They can click into that information to see it, or perhaps if they go to historical jobs, they can see all their old previous jobs too.
Yeah.
And then just to finish off on that, let's just pick, I'll pick this one here, which was completed on the 4th of June. If I hit that, it's going to load up a second box, which is basically a job detail. So this was a service at Asda, and it was actually 4 different services of 4 different assets, but it was part of one larger job. And then with that, the documents are here for the customer to download. So if I was to download this check sheet.
Right, so they're seeing their things like their test certificates and their check sheets, they're there.
But again, it's all down to how they see it and when. So you could automatically email it to them if they wish, but in this instance, they can access it in the portal straight away. And that's just a different check sheet with information on. So that's all downloaded too.
Good.
So that the portal is really powerful in that sense. They can design, your customers can design what's in there, choose what's in there, and then allow their customers the ability to log in and access that information on demand as and when they want it.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I think that really covers what I wanted to show in terms of demonstration today, unless you think there's anything there that's worth pointing out.
No, that's great. I think you can drop back to the back to the slides.
Yeah, so if I exit this, go back to that slideshow, if I'm calling it slides. So that's the slide we finished on a moment ago. Before we move on, you could probably tell we've covered those points in there.
Yeah, look, I found it really useful. There was some stuff in there as I was expecting to see, but probably some tips on how you can improve those processes. But I mean, there was some real, some amazing stuff, some real showstoppers in there for me, particularly the self-service report, and I could see how that would be hugely beneficial. I
think some parts of could be or potentially be really valuable for the customer, for their customers' experience.
Yeah. Always great to see a testimonial. But if we move on.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we're pretty much there, Adam, and thanks for showing us that it did make sense. I know it's difficult to sometimes condense what you want to say into such a short space of time, and of course we can't run webinars for hours on end. So in summary, I just wanted to say thanks for that insight, and to thank everybody that's joined us and has watched and may watch in the future. And of course, you know, we'd be delighted to continue the conversation with you if you want. Adam, you got any closing comments you want to make?
No, I think it's been a good conversation just to discuss how you do communicate with customers in those 4 or 5 ways we mentioned. If anyone does want to continue the conversation with me, I have got my contact details here now. So please feel free just to either give me a call on my mobile if it's easier for you, or just drop me an email, and we'll be able to continue this conversation and talk about how we may be able to help improve your customer communication from our experience with our clients at the moment.
Good, excellent. Well, I think that's us wrapped up then. Again, thank you very much to everybody for joining us today, and hopefully we will see you on another one in the not too distant future.
Brilliant. Cheers. Thanks to everyone. I'll hope to hear from you soon.
Bye.
Cheers. Thanks. Bye.